Hi everyone, this is the 1906 video for the day, and it's noon here already, and it still hasn't warmed up, unfortunately. So I've got my sweater back on. I guess if Dimitri was here, he would say, "What a bore." So I decided, what the heck, I would bring this lovely thing today, and this is Saint Demetrios of Thessaloniki, and he is my patron saint, but he was not Dimitri's patron saint. Dimitri's patron saint I don't have an icon of, unfortunately, and he was Saint Dimitri of Rostov, and he was actually a Cossack who became a bishop. So very interesting. And his feast day was September 21st. And let's see, in the old calendar, that would have been right about the time, within a couple of days, I think, a few days of Dimitri's birthday. So when Dimitri was born so suddenly and unexpectedly, that name was chosen perhaps on the basis of the next feast day being the feast day of Saint Dimitri of Rostov. I don't know that the imperial family had any particular reverence for that saint, but anyway, Saint Demetrius of Thessaloniki. Of course, you find more in the Greek tradition, which I'm happy to be a part of. And the only time, though, that I am ever called Demetrios is when I'm at church and when I receive the Eucharist. And then the tradition is the priest will address you by your Christian name. And so in my case, the servant of God, Demetrios, which is nice. And I always try to bring a smaller icon of Saint Demetrios with me when I go to Switzerland and to Chatzau. This one, I should add, is not a painted icon. It is a sort of sophisticated print, unfortunately, but I still like it. All right, so we have a relatively short diary entry today, but interesting. I learned a few things from this diary entry. So it's 18th March, 1906, and that was a Saturday, and we know from the previous diary entry that Dimitri was already dreading that weekend because there would be events that he would not be participating in, and the Lamings had gone off to St. Petersburg to see a relative, and so he was supposed to be left alone with Miss June, which was bad enough, but then there was another little twist to that, so let's dive in. How disgusting. I was left alone with Mademoiselle. We had dinner together, and then I played the balalaika. After that, we played cards. Maria was at the Dragoons' dinner, and I was supposed to stay with Miss June, but she was unexpectedly invited to a dinner. What a terrible bore. Port Sederholm came to see me this afternoon. He's the one who was run out of the combined battalion. The poor thing, he's so sad. He's gotten so thin and his hands shake. Tomorrow I'll be putting on formal dress and going to the lunch, which is great. Today I was almost free of head pain. 10:15. So with Mademoiselle there, I guess he was able to stay up a little later than he had been in the previous diary entries. So who was Mademoiselle? Well, I mentioned my theory a few days ago that she was probably little Boria's nanny. And so I don't know why she wouldn't have gone to St. Petersburg with the Lamings. Maybe Boria had stayed behind with Mademoiselle as well, and she had already put him to bed, or who knows? My theory could also be wrong. But hitherto in diary entries, Mademoiselle always comes into things when Dimitri is with Boria. So that's a guess. Anyway, if that was indeed the case, I'm sure it was very annoying for him, because here he was, 14 years old, and he was being left with a babysitter whose main job was to take care of an 8-year-old. And I don't know why they figured he needed someone to take care of him, for one evening. Whether that would have been standard with a Grand Duke who was that age, or whether it was Dmitri himself who needed watching, or maybe in that day of an age they just didn't leave kids that age alone. All right, so this was an interesting thing that I learned, that Dmitri was playing the balalaika, and I knew that he played various forms of the guitar. So he played, when he was living in London, he was very ardently playing the guitar, and he had a regular guitar, he had a Russian guitar, which I gather is an 8-stringed instrument, and he also had what I think was a ukulele, because he called it Hawaiian guitar. And he had something, I think the Russian guitar, that he was having a hard time finding strings for, that he was having to go to various shops in London, and I can't remember if he ever did find strings for it. But this is kind of shades of what is to come, because he's performing in this instance for Mademoiselle, and he always really liked playing for people. And I don't get the impression that he sang. I don't think that was part of it. I think he just played. I think he would have mentioned it if he had also sang. And then they play cards, some two-handed game. And so the other interesting thing is that Cederholm turns up. And if you've been listening to these right along, then you'll recognize the name. If you haven't been, there was this incident. So the combined battalion was the Combined Guards Rifle Battalion, that was also called the Imperial Family Battalion. And he was, or no, it wasn't, was it? Maybe I'm conflating two different things. There was the 4th Battalion of the Guards Rifles, that was called the Imperial Family Battalion. The Combined Battalion was probably officers and men taken from other Guards regiments and given a chance to be on guard at Tsarskoye Selo, at the Tsar's residence, which would have been considered quite an honor. But either way, Cederholm was an officer, and he was forced to leave the battalion and go back to whatever, I suppose, the main unit was that he served with. And because he had let a man go into the garden while the Empress was walking there, and apparently wanted her solitude. And so he and another officer, I believe, were forced to leave the battalion by Nicholas II because of that. And Dmitri had been upset about it at the time. He wasn't so interested in the other fellow, but apparently he and Cederholm had become, friendly acquaintances. And so he felt really bad about this, and so much so that he talked about what he would have done if he'd been the Tsar, or what he would have done if he'd been the Tsar's son, or the Tsarevich, and how he would have intervened and prevented this from happening to Cederholm. So how did he get to know Cederholm so well, especially if the man was simply on a rotation with the Combined Battalion? I don't know. I wish I did know. It makes me curious. And this is an instance where Dmitri is not so detached as he sometimes is. He feels really bad for this guy. He even notices that he's gotten thin and his hands are shaking, and that would seem to be like a pretty extreme reaction, unless Cederholm was forced to leave the army entirely, which I doubt. So maybe Dmitri misinterpreted that, but maybe just thinking about it and talking about it did provoke that reaction inside her home. And yeah, so okay, we'll see if he turns up again. And yeah, it appears that he came from wherever it was that he was stationed or he was living specifically to see Dmitri. So yeah, they were, I don't know if you could say they were friends, but they were certainly on very friendly terms and liked each other. Okay, so it turns out that the weekend is not going to be such a lost cause after all, because there's going to be a big lunch tomorrow and he's allowed to go to the lunches. And as it turns out, there will be other things as well. There will be parades, and we're getting into about a week's worth of diary entries where Dmitri just has a grand time because he's included, maybe for the first time, in these military parades. Even though he's not allowed to go to the dinner, he's allowed to participate, to wear a uniform and participate in these public events. So that's quite fun to read about. And Nicolasha, who we've been talking about in the 1920 diary entries, who was Grand Duke Nicholas Nikolaevich, and at that time he was the commander of the guards in St. Petersburg Military District, which was the premier role in the Russian army during peacetime. And so he will be there in one of these diary entries, and Dmitri will mention him. So do come back for those, and come back for today's 1920 diary entry, which will be the second day of January. I've gotten into the habit of saying 1920. It will be 1921, and quite a good one. All right, bye.